Well, welcome back to the third video that we have with Mathew Mytka. And Matthew's the Chief Platform Officer at GreaterThanX. He's also the co-founder of Greater Than Learning. Welcome, Mathew.
Thank you, Katina. Good to be continuing this conversation.
I feel very fortunate. This is part of the new core course in the Masters of Science in Public Interest Technology at Arizona State University. And this session with you, generously, is going to be on considerations when implementing solutions. Okay, so that's our third sort of focal area. And I want to start up by saying, how do you transition from prototype, that was our last episode, to a minimum viable product?
Yeah, the challenging area there, but it's generally, I guess, building on some of the things that we touched on in the talking through prototyping with stakeholders. There's how are you going to fund this? Like, is there a business model around it? Are you building some service where you're relying upon government grants and things like that? So there's a lot of variables that you need to factor in when you're going, okay, we've just built a simple app and a community-based service to help people transitioning out of relationships where domestic violence was prominent and is a theme, right? And let's say that is your focus area, and you prototype, it's like, here's the service, and this is how we're bringing in support groups and facilitating support in a community, and we've got like some simple web app that doesn't rely upon, and a reason why I would say a web app is because it doesn't rely upon any like phone technology and like any specific phone, because some people don't have access to phone. Anyway, so that's where you're looking to take things, and you've prototyped like some of the process in that service delivery, and you've got some simple kind of website to enable people to connect with this service. How do you transition from like these loose ideas and like low fidelity things to a minimum viable or minimum valuable product, platform, process? Again, one thing that I mentioned earlier was the thinking big and starting tiny and building tiny. Like that's a really important thing. When you're trying to understand what's the minimum viable, when we use the term viable, we're generally talking about the economic aspect of it, like how viable is it for us to be able to build this thing. That comes down to like the economics. You might reframe as like, what's the minimum valuable product or process or platform that we're looking for. And that reframe is sometimes important because you're focusing on the value delivery. Now, one thing that I want to emphasize here is what you measure, what you're measuring to demonstrate progress and success in any project that is focused on public interest tech is extremely important, and something that I don't think gets talked about a lot is the metrics that you're measuring are going to drive a lot of the evolution. So what is valuable in a MVP transition is going to be dependent upon your organization. So if you're this looking to provide community support for domestic violence, you might have metrics that measure things over time around ensuring confidence and safety in the first touch point, and that, how you measure that over time might be through like a simple survey or something embedded into the experience somehow. So what is valuable is making sure people can get to that outcome. So a lot of this, what's driving the transition to a minimum valuable product or process or platform is around what do we need to have in place from what we've learned in the prototype that helps achieve that outcome. so a lot of the transition's dependent on that. Given constraints, resourcing, like how do we fund this? How do we build this? How do we get stakeholders involved? Government grants, however you're building this is something that has to be factored in.
Well, I love your shift in thinking from what most commercial entities call viable to valuable. I want the students to remember that when they're talking MVP language. The other thing is to say, how much is riding on this implementation phase, right? The going through and getting this done. What's the kind of mindset that's needed as you move into this phase? There's a lot riding on this, right?
Yeah, and I guess that the mindset, I guess, like is one of youth, like for you as a individual that is engaged in this purpose-driven journey that you're on. Again, and I've repeated this several times, the think big, build tiny, start tiny is something important to incorporate into your way of working, your way of thinking about this. The other things around every failure is an opportunity to learn. You might have a lot riding on this as well. So there's sometimes a lot of risk in any of these ventures. People spend their personal savings and all their time, and your mindset needs to also shift back to you and your actual well-being. If you're not able to take care of yourself, you're unlikely to be able to engage in the complexity of public interest technology, because it's very different to developing some simple little consumer product. They're challenging as well, but when you're doing stuff in the public interest, you're generally trying to tackle, what are usually framed as like wicked problems. And that complexity can wear you down over time. So your mindset really needs to, because you're trying to commit to this, your next iteration is moving from like that prototype stage to like, actually, okay, we're gonna get something out there and test this in some way so that we can continually learn with our stakeholders. You're generally committing way more resources and energy into this stage. And it might not pay off. It might, the solution might fail for lots of different reasons. But taking care of yourself is generally one of the most important things to incorporate into your mindset, and look at every opportunity, every interaction as an opportunity to learn.
That's really beautiful. The students and I have been blogging on our community board, the internal to Canvas board at ASU, and I can share these following thoughts. Are all public interest technologists going to be poor? Are all public interest technologists going to give up their day jobs, their lucrative, attractive, six-figure salaries to go, no, actually my life and the meaning of my life is to do something like ensure that this particular species exists in the animal kingdom, in 20 years' time. Perhaps it's an endangered species, or I'm really into sustainability and recycling. I'm going to give up my job at my mainstream, organization and, throw it all away, throw the 15 years away to dedicate my life to this cause. And a lot of people have this inbuilt, right? And I always say, but we need to remember that change can be enacted in the existing workplaces we're in. And again, this notion of low fidelity. In my week 2 lecture on alignment and engagement, I talked about simple things we could do on how you bring public interest tech to the surface in your own commercial organization. You might ask a question that you never dared to ask, the group before, and it could be as simple as, has anyone asked the citizens? Or has anyone asked, the regulator? Or has anyone, just be brave, that one question. And you might think that it's not an acceptable question, but how do you know until you ask? The other thing I've said to some prospective students is the greatest change you could enact is in this massive commercial entity that you're working within, because they really need it. Like the public know, these people are desperate for it. and the brand needs it because it's not doing too well at the moment. And a lot of people are saying to me, but I want to get away from that. I want to leave this company. And I'm saying, but hang on, give this PIT degree a chance. Give it 2 years or a year if you're doing it full time after hours. And somehow, whatever you're learning in my classroom, take it to the actual practice that you're within and keep your 6-figure salary. Because perhaps you're trying to escape your responsibility as a human. But as well, if it is affecting your mental health or it is affecting your well-being in general, like physically, then perhaps the best thing is to leave, to study further perhaps, or just join another place where you think you'll find happiness. I know one gentleman has joined a non-government organization, but as an employee, he's on the payroll. Of course, that payroll doesn't pay what he paid in his previous big, company, but he's happy. And so I love the emphasis on if you're, doing okay, then you can help, others. Otherwise, don't mortgage your house, don't do anything nuts like that, because it takes deliberation. It takes a while. It's a process in itself, public interest tech. So on the third question that I've got for this implementing solutions bit, it's what types of processes need to be in place to facilitate continual discovery cycles with this content implementation?
Yeah, that's I guess, I'll narrow down on, I guess, a few, three different things. One of them is like the process that is focused on the testing of hypotheses that you want to constantly be doing, right? If you want to improve and make sure that you're optimizing for the outcomes that matter to the stakeholders, making sure that you've got a process to be generating and evaluating hypotheses in a way that is, and this partly comes down to the record keeping, which I'll talk on a little bit more about the data side in a moment. So processes around keeping track of what you've tested, what you've learned, and what you need to learn. So that kind of process around that is important. There's different tools that you can use for it, like research tools. You might even do something simple and just keep track of things in a spreadsheet. But processes need to be in place, depending on the scale of your team, organization, to make sure that you have a process down for that. The second part of this is somewhat related, and that's the data. So if you're looking to make sure that your stakeholders are continually participating in the evolution of any solution, things like privacy and security become really important. And this probably won't go over many people's heads because everyone's familiar with, the data breaches and security hacks and phishing scams, and they're just really everywhere. And I'll just tap into something that you said around why you can do this as an entrepreneur, maybe within your organization, is trust is at an all-time low. Like, people don't trust institutions. And when it comes to data, people have a lot of concerns around that. Although, there's this privacy paradox around people care about their privacy, but then they go and give all their data away to Facebook. We're not going to dive down that rabbit hole as to why, but there's this active distrust as well in the marketplace. So making sure that when you're collecting data from different stakeholders as part of this process, that you've got ways to manage that data, processes to be able to manage that data in a kind of secure and privacy preserving way. So that's another really important part of this, is keeping records, making sure those records are safe, secure, and in the collection process, that privacy, people's ability to be able to choose on what they disclose, particularly when it relates to information about them, that's factored into your process. So they're kind of the two main ones. And then the third one is the processes to be, and kind of think about this, that your processes need to be in place that enable your solution to evolve without you. You know, and this is, I guess, like a contingency plan, or you know, think about it like that. That you want to be able to build processes into your organization, your solution, so that you can step back and it can be run without you, ideally by your stakeholders. If you're focused on a co-design process, the whole point should be that you make it, like a good engineer should make themselves redundant, like a software engineer, because they've got enough working code, software, inline documentation that anyone else that has decent competencies in software engineering can just take over. They don't, you know, it's not this long process. Yeah, they need to understand the stack, the tech stack, the technology stack, and whatnot. So make yourself redundant is something that most people don't want to think about, but ideally that's an important process that needs to be there. So ideally your organization, your solution, the impact that you're having can continue making that positive impact without you.
Oh, I love that. It reminds me of a famous quote that my director, my first ever director at my real job, I call it my real job, he came out of his conclave in his massive office. He came over and sat next to me, and we were just talking. It was about the time I was thinking about going into academia. And after I told him, I think I'm going into academia, he said to me, "Kat, what are you worried about?" He said, "No one is irreplaceable." But I think on the flip side of the "no one is irreplaceable" is that we must think about the project running, because we don't know. We could go on maternity leave, you know, we could take paternal leave or whatever, bereavement leave, you know, things hit us in life. So I think it's wonderful that you identify that the project should be able to run its lifetime without you. That's a wonderful thing. It's like a legacy to allow someone to take over and project manage or deliver on the solutions. Now, there is a step between the prototyping and the implementation that I wanted to talk to you about. So we're at that stage where we've prototyped. Let's just say the prototype shows us that we shouldn't continue. So when we talk about feasibility studies, and that's a core assessment in my 502 course, and I put it in there because I said to the students and humans, I assume we're going to get to that last stage, and you'll have the pitch day and you'll tell us everything about what you've done. But I said it's a critical step. And so we've got, you mentioned the economic feasibility that I was alluding to with the viable product bit. We talked about social, a little bit, feasibility, operational and technical. Let's just assume technical is easy because, you know, technology never fails, of course. But let's just say we've got three options: to do something, to do nothing, or to go for the Rolls-Royce solution, do everything, right? They're typically what you find in textbooks. What happens when we don't go from prototyping to implementation? Because, you know, we were talking about customers. If we pay an end user to come and give us some feedback, they'll tell us something because they're getting paid for it. That's the expectation. Okay, well, what happens if you're the consulting company and you're going, well, we've taken you through to the prototyping stage, we've got all the feedback, but you know what? You really shouldn't be implementing the full solution. Just go this far, or at the worst case or best case, depending on how you see it, you do nothing. Have you ever been in those situations?
Yeah, many times. Both in my own kind of a startup ventures as a entrepreneur, as well as like within organizations or working with organizations. So that's extremely common, I guess. When if you get to a point, a lot of the times, you know, your minimum is some portion of a bigger solution. That might be where things go, but you're trying to find the most high value or high leverage process, feature, service delivery as possible that's going to meet your metrics of success. You know, and in public interest tech, those are going to be, I guess, some commercial drivers, because, you know, if you think about it in a commercial sense, not necessarily as a for-profit organization, you might be an NGO. How sustainable is it that you can continually rely upon government grants? Probably not that sustainable. So when it's rare that the full idea is something you're like, yeah, everything that we came up with is great. Actually, that's never the case. It's usually a portion of it that you focus on, and a lot of that comes down to the analysis stage in all the data, all the learnings, all the insights that you've generated through research and prototyping should inform the best possible solution to go to implement. Because once in a software context, once you start cutting code, it's easier to move some pixels on a page than it is to, refactor, like rewrite a bunch of code. So from an economic perspective, you're trying to reduce some risk there. So yeah, I'm sure that really answers the question, but a lot of it is going to come down to analysis at that point with what's in the MVP.
Yeah. That does answer my question, and it offers some wonderful insights for us to think about as a class. Mathew Mytka, that's the completion of our third video. I hope I can twist your arm, although I know it doesn't need much twisting for me to get you to come back into the future, perhaps the next time we run this course later in the year. But I just want to say thank you for volunteering your time. I mean, you are part of a commercial entity, GreaterThanX, and I know about your wonderful ideas in Greater Than Learning. And you know what I think? I think your project, which is going to turn into a massive international solution. How do people learn? How do they share? And that's what you're doing here. You're putting into practice your co-founding solution on Greater Than Learning. I think what you're going to have is this spirit of altruism coming out in people. Yes, we work in a life world setting where we're a citizen. We could be a parent or a sibling or a child of somebody, obviously, if everyone is still healthy and well. And then we are citizen of a nation, but also part of a corporate entity or a government entity or an NGO. We have another function, right, beyond citizenry. But this is the model that I think is going to fly as we change from this money-hungry environment. Yes, we all know we need money to survive, but how do we do this for the public interest? And it is sharing. It's sharing what we know. It's building one another up. It's connecting. It's coming online and saying, there are certain rules and things and regulations in my workplace. I can't share certain things with you. I can't share trade secrets, the KFC secret sauce or Coca-Cola secret, whatever ingredients. We're not talking about that. We're talking about general things that can be shared to help people grow and to help people become educated. Like if they watch you enough, I know someone's going to go, well, maybe I should do a degree in design. Maybe I like this kind of work that he's talking about on co-design and participatory design. I want to be like him. And you're going to be that person for students in my course. I hope beyond the borders of ASU as we put this up on YouTube and other outlets like archive.org. But thank you for giving up your time and so generously.
You're welcome. And I guess being in a kind of teacher role many times in my life, a lot of the times, and as cliche as it is, if you can catalyze learning and inspiration in just one student, it was all worth it.
And that's you, and I'm your student. So thank you, Mathew Mytka. Bye for now.
You're welcome. Thanks, Katina.